So, what about that Broly movie, huh? So, the new Dragon Ball Super Broly movie just recently had its world premiere in Japan, and information has been sort of slowly leaking out from there and from other sources. Between all that kind of stuff, we've got to the point where the fan base has basically sort of put everything together and kind of sort of knows every big major thing that actually happens in this Broly movie, and also lots of minor things as well. Like, if you want, you could basically get the synopsis of like the entire movie spoiled for you through multiple sources. So if you want to know, you can check out Geeks in 101's video. I know Anime AJ also did a very detailed synopsis, and also recently on Reddit they made a really long kind of summary synopsis, pretty much putting together like all of those sources and other things as well. I haven't actually looked at all of those big detailed synopses because, I mean, although I do kind of want to know what happens in the movie, I don't want every single minor detail spoiled for me, especially considering it's so long until it actually kind of comes out in other places. But, you know, if you guys want to, you can do that. But I'm sure now people are kind of curious as to what my opinion on the stuff that we've seen about this movie is, considering I've been not necessarily that vocal here, but in other places I've kind of expressed my distaste for a lot of the stuff in this movie and the sort of direction of this movie in general. And I mean, I'll be honest, while there is some stuff that is confirmed to be in the movie, that the kind of sheer audacity as to what they actually did kind of makes me roll my eyes a little. At the same time, there is some other stuff that I wasn't expecting them to really do or really sort of go in depth into, and so I am kind of pleasantly pleased at some of that. That being said, some of the stuff that I'm actually kind of interested in about this Broly movie, some of the stuff that seems like it's going to be better than I was expecting, is also for me leading to its own separate concerns that I'm having over this movie. This is probably the spoiler cutoff point. From this point onwards, I'm going to be talking about some things that actually happen in the movie and haven't been kind of publicly confirmed to happen yet. Like I said, I don't know everything because I haven't read like the most detailed synopses. I've just read a few of them, just read some information and things that sort of got spoiled for me from other people. So it's not everything. You don't need to be 100% up to date, but if you don't know what the general sequence of events that happens in this plot of the movie is, you probably maybe don't want to watch this unless you want to get spoiled. So basically, I've kind of heard two major discussions about this movie for just based on some of the stuff that we've heard about it. The first is that Broly is actually surprisingly kind of interesting, kind of a compelling character in his own right. He's got a backstory, he's got a personality, and either way he's just much more interesting than he was in movie 8. And the other thing is that, like, basically compared to previous Dragon Ball stuff, this is kind of like an almost unparalleled visual spectacle, and it just looks amazing. The second point there is something that I'm also really glad to hear. I mean, considering how rough Dragon Ball Super started out as, back when there was kind of no pre-production and everything was just kind of a bit of a mess, it's great to hear that we can say that something Dragon Ball related is like this great visual spectacle again, after it basically became a meme when Super Episode 5 came out. But that being said, it's the combination of those two elements, the fact that Broly kind of has an interesting character, and the fact that this movie is just an amazing visual spectacle, that's sort of making me a little bit concerned over the direction of this movie, and what exactly this movie is going to be like. Basically, my biggest concern is that there might end up being a little bit of a tonal disconnect between what the fight with Broly is supposed to be like and what it kind of implies, and what the Broly fight actually looks like and what people are actually kind of excited to see. See, what makes Broly, or at least this new version of Broly, kind of stand out compared to the old Broly and just sort of compared to a lot of characters in general, is the fact that he doesn't seem to really like fighting that much. He doesn't seem like he really wants to fight. It seems like he's only really fighting because, first of all, Paragus was telling him to, and he still actually cares about his dad to sort of do what his dad tells him to do. And second of all, once he sort of gets Super Saiyan, he gets kind of crazy, rage-filled, and is sort of at that point, I'm not even really sure what he's doing. What that does to this fight, especially compared to other Broly fights and other fights in the series, is that what's kind of unique about this is that since Broly sort of doesn't really want to fight that much, it's kind of like Broly doesn't really want to be in this fight in the first place. It's sort of like this whole thing is just a clash of things beyond their control, and Broly's not really happy about doing it. I mean, maybe Goku and Vegeta are happy about it because they like fighting strong opponents. Maybe Frieza's happy about it because he wants to see Goku and Vegeta get defeated. But Broly himself, it seems like if he had any sort of agency, he would rather not want to do this in the first place. And we know that at that point in the story, Broly is somewhat a sympathetic character because we actually do see his backstory. We see the Frieza grunts meeting him and talking to him and getting a relationship to him, and having him also mention his backstory and stuff like that. So it's almost like this fight with Broly is a bad thing. It's something that we don't really want to happen, because we know that Broly doesn't want to be involved with it because he doesn't really want to fight in the first place. We think that maybe Goku doesn't want it because he knows that Broly isn't a bad guy and he doesn't necessarily want to kill him either. But at the same time, the other thing we know about this movie is that the fight scenes are going to be an unparalleled visual spectacle. That the fights are going to look really, really cool. That Gogeta is in this movie, a character who fans have wanted for years and years and years, and he's going to totally beat up Broly while looking really, really cool. And we, as the Dragon Ball audience, as people who have grown up on the idea that, we need to watch fights and fights are cool and everybody likes fights, is that we want to see the grand visual spectacle. We want to see the fight with Broly go on for as long as possible so we can just see as many bits of cool animation as we can. We want to see Gogeta beat up Broly because seeing Gogeta as a fusion is cool, and seeing a fusion beat a guy who they couldn't beat before is also cool. So I'm worried that there might be a bit of a tonal disconnect because Broly and Goku and Vegeta don't necessarily want this fight to have to keep happening because Broly doesn't want to fight and Goku and Vegeta don't necessarily want to kill him. But we as the audience do want to see the fight keep going because we know that the longer the fight goes, the more cool animation that happens, the more big flashy particle effects that happen, the more like big crazy world-breaking feats happen. So that could potentially lead to a situation where the narrative is sort of telling us one thing that we should be feeling, but then like the way that the action is shown, if the action is shown is just such a cool, over-the-top, like crowd-pleasing way, that is going to make us feel something completely different, and that just leads to a disconnect between how we're supposed to be feeling and how we're actually feeling. I know some of you might then be thinking that perhaps I'm looking a bit too deep into this. I mean, come on, it's Dragon Ball. It's a show about fighting. Fighting is always great. Everybody always likes fighting. Fighting is sort of what is privileged most in the world of Dragon Ball. But I'm pretty sure a situation like this has only occurred in the Dragon Ball franchise maybe like one at a time. A situation where the protagonist doesn't necessarily want to keep fighting, or at least the character who we have sympathies towards doesn't necessarily want to keep fighting, and yet the fight keeps going anyway. Because most villains in Dragon Ball still actually want to fight. They still kind of have that desire to fight. It might just be because they really want to show that they are stronger and they can potentially kill the protagonist, but they want to keep fighting. And then on the protagonist side, Goku obviously always wants to fight, either because people he cares about are going to die if he doesn't defeat this guy, or he's just really interested in the thrill of the fight in general, or both. The only time that I'd argue that this dynamic didn't happen was during the fight with Gohan and Cell. I know I bring that up a lot, especially recently, but I swear this time it's pretty much just a coincidence. But in that fight, Gohan actively says that he doesn't really want to fight, that he doesn't really want to kill Cell, even though he knows that Cell is a cruel, evil monster who needs to be stopped. Cell basically has to force Gohan to want to fight by trying to get him really, really angry. And when that happens, when Cell pushes Gohan enough to go Super Saiyan 2 and start like fighting and trying to kill him, I think there is that sense of tonal disconnect, where what Gohan ends up doing is the thing that needs to happen at the time, but at the same time it kind of almost feels like Gohan doesn't necessarily want to be like that. That ruthless fighting personality isn't the kind of thing that he necessarily wants to be like. I mean, the story makes it very clear when Gohan purposely avoids killing Cell off because he wants him to suffer more, that is kind of the wrong way of going about it, and Gohan in this sort of attitude is something that should probably be discouraged. We don't want to say that Gohan wants to lose because he's still basically the only person who can beat Cell, but we don't want him to be like that. We don't want him to have that personality. We don't want him to necessarily be that guy who previously just ripped up the Cell Juniors into big bloody pieces. And then, Gohan screws up, Goku has to die, Gohan beats himself up over the mistakes that he made, and then when Cell comes back, Gohan gets to use that power in a way that's a bit nicer and a bit less sort of, I'm going to sort of lose force myself to rage because that's the only way I can win. When I personally view those scenes, I can look at it in that way. I can look at seeing Super Saiyan 2 Gohan go around and beat up people really, really ruthlessly with this sort of kind of hesitation, sort of being like, oh, that's really brutal. I don't really like the fact that you're acting like this. I think this is kind of messed up. I hope that you don't stay like this forever and something sort of changes. But I know that that is not the case for everyone, because I know there are a lot of fans who say that Super Saiyan 2 Gohan was like the most badass version of Gohan, and he was like the best, and he should totally be like that again, and that's why I want him to have more screen time so he can be like he was when he fought Cell. The fact that there can be two almost completely opposite readings of the Gohan Cell fight does make me realize that this kind of total disconnect can actually happen, because it's happened before. I personally think that the Gohan Cell fight does enough in the fight to really sort of show that the big crazy flashy action isn't necessarily a good thing, but I don't necessarily know if the Broly movie is going to be able to do that. I'm worried that the Broly fight might look so cool and do so many things that the fans have wanted to see that it sort of implies that the big Broly fight is something that should be happening and something that we should be glad to see happening, even if it's kind of hurting Broly inside to keep doing it. And whether or not that is the case is something that I don't think I can really answer just by reading detailed plot synopses. This is something that at the end of the day comes down to direction. How is the movie directed? How is the fight scene framed? By whose point of view are we looking at? When the characters get hurt, do they actually show visible shock over it? Are they actually kind of upset over the fact that they're getting hurt from this fight? What's the lighting like? What's the music like? All of these things combined together are what creates an atmosphere for a scene, and creates the mood for a scene, and creates what the audience is supposed to be feeling about a scene. We might have the flashiest animation in the world, and it could still be successfully framed as a really tragic thing, as a thing that we don't necessarily want to see. It's sort of like, either way, you're going to be watching an explosion, but the way that the scene is directed shows us how we're supposed to feel. Whether we're supposed to look at the explosion in awe at how amazing it is and how big it is, or whether we're supposed to look at the explosion with maybe a bit of awe, but also a bit of sorrow from the stuff that had to be destroyed to make it happen. If you're watching a train wreck in slow motion, you could still kind of feel like the train wreck is sort of beautiful in its own messed up way, while still feeling empathetic for whatever lives were lost during it. So that's what I mean by, at the end of the day, it's going to come down to direction. And by that, I mean, at the end of the day, this all rests on Tatsuya Nagamine, the director of this movie, because he's the one that's responsible in how these scenes are framed, in what these scenes mean, and in what these action scenes mean in the first place. That being said, at the end of the day, you know, I actually do have faith in Nagamine's ability as a director. I know he directed one of my favorite Pretty Cure seasons, for one. He also directed One Piece film Z, a film that does also have a very sympathetic antagonist, somebody who we do kind of feel sorry for while he's fighting, because we kind of understand what his ideals are like, even if the fight scene looks really, really cool. But honestly, even if the movie is competently directed, and even if I do understand what Nagamine was going for, and I don't feel that sense of disconnect, I don't know if that's necessarily going to apply to everyone. I'm sure there will be people who come out of that movie being like, oh man, I can't wait to see Broly go berserk for another movie, because then it's going to be like the best thing ever, and we get to see all those flashy fight scenes again, and we can see Gogeta again. I want to see Gogeta versus Broly again, even if that's something that Broly himself as a character would definitely not want to happen at all, and heck, I don't even think Gogeta would want to happen at all again. After all, I have spent several years of my life doing YouTube, understanding that sometimes I get different ideas out of Dragon Ball than what other people get out of Dragon Ball. It's not to say that my reading is better than their reading or whatever, it's just more like, at this point in this movie, if I subscribed to that reading, to their reading, and that reading was the overall dominant reading that I kind of got from the entire movie, I think I would be very confused as to what this movie was supposed to be like, what this movie's supposed to mean, what Broly is supposed to be as a character. Basically, the same disconnect that I had after watching movie 8 and reading Shigeyasu Yamauchi's comments about how Broly was supposed to be kind of a tragic figure, because that was something I didn't really get from the action at all. It's kind of of hard to say that the guy that gleefully informs everybody that he's the devil and kills his father without a second thought is a tragic figure, regardless of what the original intention was. So, yeah, Nagamine, please make this movie good. I am crossing my fingers. I don't think it's necessarily going to make me say having another Broly movie was a good idea, because it didn't necessarily have to be Broly to do this kind of story, but yeah, Nagamine, please. Me, as a random Australian girl who somehow watches Dragon Ball, I hope you make a really good movie. The movie's basically already done, but I hope it's good. I really do. Because I want this movie to be something good. Of course I do. I don't want to go into a film and be like, okay, that was a terrible film, that was a waste of time, a waste of money, and a waste of the franchise. So I want this to be good. I hope it's good, and I hope even if there's stuff that I don't necessarily like about it, that I can find some good in it.